who's ready to go down a wild ride. Dr. J just recently spoke to Ben Carson. He's got a lot of stuff to say about ancient aliens, technology lost, and a lot of other things. And Dr. J's making a big comeback, so let's just get ready to listen to his incredible interview with Ben Carson. Listen up, everybody.
Let me introduce to you, he's also an Ancient Aliens star, or someone who has appeared on that. Gaia, he's got his own program, and he's also one of the largest social media managers with forbidden knowledge within this topic. Actually, I don't know anybody else within these conventions or people that we normally acknowledge as being people who know about extraterrestrials, etc. So that happens to be the one and only Mr. Billy Carson. Mr. Carson, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Now, let's take it back to the beginning. At what point did you realize that we may not be alone, and if the evidence that we're not alone has been here on Earth via crashes or ancient civilizations and being covered up? What was the aha moment for you?
That was 1977. I was living in Miami, Florida, near the Opa-locka Airport. I lived in Opa-locka. There's a subdivision of Miami. And basically, I was out in the backyard. I used to go out in the backyard and watch the airplanes go over, small private airports. So I just watched the prop jets and the small jets go over, and it amazed me how they would move across the horizon. From my perspective, it looked like they were moving slow, but obviously they had to be moving hundreds of miles an hour to stay in the air. And so that just really got to me. But one day when I was out there, this object came across the horizon from the same direction as the airport, but it wasn't an airplane. I just knew it wasn't an airplane because it didn't have wings, it didn't have a fuselage, cockpit, or tail. And it cleared the horizon in seconds, not minutes. And that's when I knew I saw something incredible. And then it shot back in the same direction and stopped what I can estimate now probably about 200 or 300 meters above my head, hovering completely silently, and then took off the way that it came in the blink of an eye. And I literally was totally amazed. And I went to back then there was no Google, there was no cable TV, none of that existed. I had to go to my school and go to the library and get the Encyclopedia Britannicas, and I started researching aerospace from then.
Now, unfortunately, is people, for some reason, do not believe that we can expand our laws of physics. For instance, if something is traveling several thousands of miles per hour, then if it's not creating a sonic boom, something is up with that. That means people, especially scientists, and I've had several on this show over the years, who are so hard-headed, they think that this is the universal law. But would you agree that it's, we are still learning? I mean, 120 years ago, manned flight was an impossibility. Then comes, of course, the Apollo missions to the moon. Again, things that if you were living in 1895, you are a science fiction writer. So I think more is coming to the forefront. And let me ask you this. Why do you think there has been such an increase in people paying attention to these type of topics?
Well, we've got a couple of inputs coming in that are really opening our eyes and desensitizing us. So you have a lot of TV. I remember when the cable TV man first came to our house in Miami and knocked on the door and said, there's something new coming out called cable TV. This was in the 1980s, early 80s. And we connected from this electric line to your house. And once we got that box, one of the most incredible shows or movies that I watched was The Last Starfighter. And so it really opened us up to this idea of space travel. And we had Flash Gordon, and all of a sudden that TV that barely picked up any channels. I think we had 4 channels when I was a kid. Now all of a sudden we had 25 channels, and it was like, wow, the world opened up, and now we're starting to see UFOs, aliens, spaceships, other planets. And over the years, more and more people, generation after generation, have been desensitized to UFOs and aliens and spaceships and space travel and space science fiction movies. And so now all of a sudden, once the military starts coming out, like with the ATIP documents and things like that, and the Pentagon saying, oh, yeah, we're in possession of vehicles not of this world, people are just open to talking about this and really expressing themselves and openly talking about some of the things that have been a question mark in their head for years. And so it's created an open topic. It really is just this soft disclosure that has happened through Hollywood, to be honest with you, that has made people more open to it.
Now, some people say that it was because of movies, books, comics that coined the term little green men or other things like that. But I tend to argue the other side, which is that movies generally represent what people see. Do you think that the reason movies like, say, Close Encounters of the Third Kind or anything, E.T. even, is based because of what humanity had seen and experienced over millennia, if not even longer, if that's proven? Or is it, do you think that people are talking about gray aliens because that's what was seen in some blockbuster hit? Like, for instance, it's not gray alien, but I think it's a green alien in the movie Signs.
Mm-hmm. Well, the reality is, I mean, as far as you can go back in ancient history, and I'm talking about deep, deep antiquity, if I go into the Sumerian tablets, the Emerald tablets, if I go into the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Code of Hammurabi, the Enuma Elish, no matter how far back I go, 20, 30, 40, 100, 200,000 years, 400,000 years, I'm still finding people describing UFOs and people coming from space. And every indigenous culture on this planet, prior to the colonization and the conversion into other thought processes, were all believing in these space brothers and star brothers and people coming from space to teach them, and describing the craft that they use to arrive in. So we're talking about something that's really embedded into our epigenetic memories and has been passed down from generation to generation through the RNA. And so, yes, Hollywood does give us this soft disclosure, but what it really does, it triggers these ancient memories from our, ancient ancestors of what they experienced. And what they experienced was real, and they documented it very, very well, that people came here from space and engaged mankind.
Now, do you think we are being invaded, or is it just because people have more free time, forced in the last year? Because from what I gather, there are far more videos that we see at Third Phase of Moon. So many submissions that they have to turn down several just to pick the most, the ones that have quality and are, witnesses. But I have a feeling that it's not necessarily because of us staring at the sky and having a 4K video camera or smartphone, whatever you want to call it, in your pocket. I am truly starting to see that whatever was being hidden in the past is out more so in the open. So, do you think we're being invaded?
I think that the invasion had already begun. I think that what we're seeing is that these people, these beings, they're making themselves more available to see. They're making themselves, seen. And so what their ships do, and a lot of people tend to think a lot of these beings might be multidimensional. I'm pretty sure there are some multidimensionals, but I think the majority of them just have technology. Human beings can only see 1% of the light spectrum.
That's right.
So we only get to see the colors of the rainbow, literally. But there are animals out there that can see even more than we can see. Hummingbirds and insects can see in the ultraviolet. So these beings are very smart. They know that we can't see ultraviolet, we can't see infrared with the naked eye, we can't see multispectrum. So what they do is they shift into gamma ray, they shift into ultraviolet, they shift into the different multispectrum lights that we can't get access to with our naked eyes. So they're there, but they're not there. They hide in plain sight. And I think a lot of what's happened now more recently is they seem to have just switched off and gone into visual mode for human eye range, human vision range, and they're letting us know, like, hey, like, we're here, guys. And I think we're being observed, monitored, watched. Just like we go out into the Serengeti Desert, we go out into the jungles of Brazil and any other nature preserve, and we watch the animals. We hide cameras inside their dens, and we watch them being born, and we alien abduct them because we're the aliens. So we shoot them with a dart, we knock them out, and then we put a tracking device inside their body, and then we monitor their where they go and how far they swim in the oceans and all this kind of stuff. The same thing that the aliens are doing to us.
Now, let's talk about disclosure. I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. That's my personal opinion. But at the same time, when the DoD released those videos, which actually TTSA was the group that forced the hand in 2017, I started proclaiming this is disclosure. This is as best as we're going to get. Do you think that maybe in June, the 180 day is going to show us something spectacular and different craft landing and people physically seeing them, as opposed to sort of covert when they're doing abductions or contacts? Aside, of course, seeing in the sky different sizes and shapes of craft. But I don't know if the United States government will do anything that it hasn't done already in the past, which is ridicule or release as little as information as possible. One major thing, as you just mentioned, was talked about for, I think, 24 hours, maybe even less. Off-world vehicle, not from this Earth. That was global in all the everywhere, TV, internet, newspapers. But I think it was not even, the next day, they removed certain key phrases to make it seem like it could be a meteor, because they removed the world vehicle, and I believe they even removed Earth. Why do you think that happened?
Well, of course, it's create confusion, hide the truth in plain sight, and then make it extremely ambiguous so as to keep it in a very really intelligent way, to keep it suppressed at the same time. So we can say that we told you, but at the same time, we're going to cover it up in plain sight and make people think that the ones who are talking and posting and writing about it, that they may be crazy or off their noggin or something. As far as disclosure goes, hard disclosure is never going to come, because then you would have to admit to the decades of lies. But what they will do is we have the Perseverance rover on Mars, just landed a few weeks ago. And Perseverance has the science kits on it. And the reason why they put the science kit on it to detect life is because they're going to announce alien life within the next 5 years using the Perseverance rover to announce alien life. And that alien life is going to be in the form of bacteria.
Yeah, thank you. You actually, that was what I was going to say, because I don't think they're going to say, hey, by the way, we have intelligent beings that are more intelligent than us. So, single-celled, entities. But you're absolutely right, because there has been methane created on Mars, and then it goes away. So yes, I do think it will be bacteria. So in your opinion, in June, or let's just say July, when it's after 180 days, do you think that's what's going to be essentially the main story, as opposed to more pilots chasing tic tacs and gimbals around?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to come up with any more pilot stories this soon. I really don't think that this 180 my opinion is a 180-day thing is just probably not going to be as explosive or incredible as people think it is. I think it's just going to putter out, but I think that within the next few years, we'll hear about, bacteria and single cell organisms on Mars. But I don't think that this 180 day thing is going to pan out to be anything.
Now, let's talk about Antarctica for a moment, or for as long as you want. Now, because the ice is melting, and that's a whole different conversation of what it does to the planet, because it's actually not going to be global warming, from what I've read in science magazines, journals, etc., is that once more ice melts, it's going to cool the oceans and possibly. Thank you. No one really says that, and I'm so thankful that you just did. But aside from that, as the ice is melting, aren't anomalous things found? For instance, I heard that a ground penetrating radar actually found a complex structure. And if the ice has been over Antarctica for, I don't know how many thousands of years or longer than that, who would have created that, and why are they trying to hide it so much? It reeks to me of course, of a conspiracy of some sort, but possibly, would you say that our missing link is tied to that? And if not, what do you think we're going to find out from Antarctica, assuming we're allowed to go?
Right. Well, Antarctica is a very, very amazing place for a couple of reasons. First of all, the ice has been over there for 13,000 years. So anything that we find now is at least 13,000 years old plus. We already know it's going to be plus. We found a very, very large pyramid, which made it onto, my team found this pyramid, which made it onto Ancient Aliens 2 seasons ago. And there's complexes there. There are geometric structures there underneath the ice. There are some that are gigantic 30-meter openings leading into an area where we have all of the bases, the research bases from every major continent in the world is there, including the Rothschild and Rockefeller, or it's really called the Rockefeller Foundation. They have a base there as well, of course. But
of course.
I think that when you look at Antarctica and a lot of these, forget the structures. Let's talk about the actual animals that have been now found with this melting ice. When they do an autopsy on the animals, they find undigested food in their stomachs over and over again. So what does this mean? This means that Antarctica, which actually was part of Atlantis, it was part of the Atlantean civilization, not just the Ring City, because the Ring City was just one capital of many. Atlantis was a global civilization. I talk about this in my book. But what they found with this food in the belly, which means that Antarctica was in a much more tropical location and then extremely rapidly moved into the location that it's in now. And these animals in the foliage were all flash frozen. And how can this happen? Well, we have a planet with tectonic plates. And every so many tens of thousands of years, those tectonic plates have a major global slip or a major continental slip. And when that happens, you have a pole shift of the crust of the Earth itself. So the crust moved into that position within just a few short hours.
Wow.
Probably creating also a global or partly global flood, because that kind of movement will create a huge flood around most of the planet. And so we have the fact that there's undigested food in their stomachs is evidence of a pole shift of the crust of the planet itself. So that was part of the reason why Atlantis sunk and went underwater, because of this pole shift, and as well as a lot of the ancient sites, which were highly technological, were covered by ice.
Now, like you said, if they have undigested food in their, bellies, stomachs, essentially that is a no-brainer that they were killed fairly quickly, and like you
Yeah.
said, in a couple of hours. And another thing too is I'm glad you brought up the fact that the circle or circle within a circle within a circle part of Atlantis is just the city. It's not the entire, whatever
Mhm.
you want to call it, continent or something else. Now, do you think that there was something that happened on Atlantis where people maybe revolted against Nephilim or ETs or something that caused them, or is it just natural?
Um, I think it's when you look at some of the ancient texts, part of it seems like allegories. It seems like this war that happened, and this war was a battle between the gods. Now these gods have been called many names. They were called Greek gods. They were called the Netiru from ancient Egypt, or really the land of Kem before it was called Egypt. And so and so basically these gods were really related, and they were going against each other, fighting each other for resources and control of humans on the planet. And one of these gods, whose name is Marduk, who made it into the modern day Bible, he's also known as Amen-Ra in the text, and also Aten, the sun god or the sun disk, which Akhenaten used to worship, and came ushered in monotheism. He wanted to not only take over his kingship of the planet ahead of his processional period time, he started a war to do it, and then he started two pyramid wars, which literally included or involved what we now seemed a lot of circumstantial evidence says nuclear type weapons. And some of the evidence can be found in Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley. Of course, the entire swath across Africa, which looks like a desert. If you put your hand in that sand, which I've been there in person, you pull up balls of glass. And those balls of glass are from 3,000 plus degree temperatures.
Wow.
So we have evidence all around the planet of these nuclear wars, including, like I said, Mohenjo-Daro. The bodies of the dead are still laying in the street holding hands after all these thousands of years, and scavengers haven't even eaten any of the bodies. Then when you go there with a Geiger counter, they're still above the background radiation. It's still higher than background radiation there. So, and the buildings turn into glass. The bricks turn into glass. So we're looking at a war that was started between these beings. And this war not only extended around the planet Earth, it even extended to the moon and all the way to Mars.
Now, with regards to Mars, I've heard from multiple people that we originated from there, and one of the things they talk about is our circadian rhythm. It actually matches closer to Mars than Earth.
Yes.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, and our circadian rhythm, for those who don't know, is the sleep and wake rhythm cycle of the human body. It's the human bio clock, basically. Now, Mars is orbits on this axis is a slight tick slower than Earth. It's around 23 hours. And what they found was that the human circadian rhythm is matched perfectly to Mars versus Earth's, which is very interesting. Now, when you read the Enuma Elish and the Seven Tablets of Creation, or even if you read the Atrahasis Epic, you discover that there were these Igigi working class Anunnaki who came from Mars to Earth to go to war against Enki and Enlil. And the reason why they were going to go to war was because they were tired of doing a lot of labor on Mars and complained about not even having any women. These were the sons of God, because they were all sons of Anu, who basically fell from heaven. Heaven meaning space. They came from Mars down.
Is this why they slept
and
with
when they came to an agreement?
Is this why they slept with the beautiful woman of Earth?
Correct. This is why they did it. They in the Enuma Elish, which predates the Bible by 6,000 years, they take women back. After an agreement was made to not have the war, and that they would genetically modify the existing hominid on the planet and put them to work instead, they said, okay, fine, we'll give you guys some time to make that happen. But while we're leaving now, but we're going to take some of these women with us. So they took women with them.
I lost that last part where you said take woman with that. You just cut out.
They took women to Mars with them.
Ah, I see. Now, see that this is one thing that bewilders me because when the Space Force was announced, well, I don't think it was just created at that time. Personally, I believe that it was just being revealed. I actually interviewed someone who said that he saw someone in Oahu, in that famous base where Edward Snowden was working out of before he took off to Hong Kong. The point was is that going back to I believe 2007 is this is when this gentleman told me that they actually had a space force and they were communicating with not just our astronauts that are further away than Mars and etc. and other things like that, but they were also communicating with extraterrestrials, which is ironic in the sense that if they were vocalizing communications, that's sort of new to me because I would think that once you get to that level and your brain is fully unlocked and you wake up the muscles and you actually have telepathy, what good would it really do to have vocal conversations anymore unless you're screaming for help or something like that?
Right. Yeah, I mean, when you reach a certain when you reach a certain level of consciousness, now you have to realize our cousins on this planet who were the Homo sapiens or hominids, I'm sorry, before Homo sapiens existed, they were smarter than us spiritually and consciously. They weren't smarter technologically. So before, now the Anunnaki did not create humans. This is a big myth. Nowhere does it say they created us. What they did was they genetically modified the existing hominid and then they bred us. The existing hominid, which would have been our cousin, our bodies have been found all over the planet. Bigger heads, bigger bodies, stronger. And because of the bigger brain case, probably much more intelligent and probably most likely all DNA was connected, not disconnected. Now we have quote unquote junk DNA. Well, that's not junk. It used to be connected for a reason. Mm-hmm. And so I believe that our ancestors had the ability to do telepathy, also, telekinesis. They probably had the ability to sense the Earth's magnetic field. We all have millions of magnetite crystals in our brains right now. We should be able to navigate the Earth via the magnetic field, just like birds and sea turtles and so forth, and we can still sense it. We don't sense it. We don't knowingly sense it. They took a person, a man, they put him inside of a laboratory with a giant magnet and connected electrodes to his head to pick up the sensory perception of the magnetic field. And as the magnet moved around the room, the brain was able to sense it. He was still totally unaware that he was sensing the magnetic field, but we can see on the computer that the brain was. But our ancestors were completely aware of it and utilized that to navigate. This is why they didn't need maps. They didn't need GPS. They didn't need any of that. So I think we were more in tune with the resonant frequency of the Earth, with each other. And and so when you get to a high level of civilization, and when our DNA reconfigures and gets stronger, and we add more helixes, and we elevate our consciousness, those natural abilities are going to reconfigure in the human avatar body, and they will come back. And so you have to think that there's alien races out there that have achieved this and are still maintaining it at this point.
Now, let's talk about ancient civilizations. Some people say that humanity, tens of thousands of years ago or even earlier, we existed and something went wrong. Usually we screwed up and we were erased, and then another civilization. And from what I'm hearing, I believe the most recent person to relay this information to me was Linda Moulton Howe, that she said that we are in the third civilization of humanity on this planet. Did you ever hear anything like that in the past for you?
Um, you broke up at the last part there. You said something about civilization on the planet.
Yeah, yeah. Linda Moulton Howe is the most recent person to relay information to me from her sources because she doesn't, tell her sources. And even
Yeah.
before that, I actually interviewed people that said that our civilization, humanity, right now is not the first time. It's actually up to the third time.
Yes, that's
And
correct.
okay, so
Yeah.
and you mentioned the flood earlier. The flood, the Great Flood, is mentioned in literally almost every religious book
Hmm.
in history book, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's just the same flood at the same time, or was
Hmm.
there multiple floods, or
Yeah.
uh,
There
why
were
do you
multiple floods.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Or I would think too, just the way, what mainstream science says, and I have to emphasize mainstream science when I say science because a lot of it is not, a lot of arrogance there, and that's the sad part, is when they talk about the last extinction level event with dinosaurs was approximately 65, 66 million years ago. In your research, were the two prior human civilizations killed off both by floods, or maybe one by flood and one by a meteor?
Well, when you look at the historical record, and I'm talking about the ancient, what the records that the ancient peoples left behind for us, you find that it appears to be at one point the Earth was struck by an asteroid or a comet of some sort. Now, this created a massive, massive, almost global flood and it didn't kill everybody. None of the floods killed everybody. That's another thing that has been misconstrued a little bit. It even says it in a lot of the more modern religious texts, and when I say modern, I'm talking about, the Bible and things like that, that not everyone died. It even says that not everyone died. And in ancient texts, for sure, it says not everyone died. Matter of fact, 36,000 years ago, Thoth talked about the fact that the flood waters were residing and the ancient temple was coming up out of the mud. And he says that his father told him to go to the land of the hairy barbarians that were hiding in the caves that had survived the rush of the fountains. So there were obviously a lot of people that did survive these different floods that occurred at different time periods. And some of the floods weren't global. Some were just regional, like huge regions now, like, maybe a quarter of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
But some of them were almost planetary. So there's probably three floods that I can detect now going through a lot of these texts and just judging the time periods that they were. But still, there were a lot of survivors amongst. Now, a lot of people did die, but there still were a lot of survivors in each one of those situations.
Now, let's switch gears to more proof that's been popping up about the Earth, or our civilization being advanced is a good word to use than what they portrayed us as. Oh no, Sumerians and then Egyptians, nothing before that. But we have things like Göbekli Tepe.
Hmm.
Can you tell us? Well, I think people listening here for me and watching the background I have, I would think almost all of them know about Göbekli Tepe since multiple guests have talked about it. Can you refresh people and tell them, and for those who may have not heard or know what it is, can you describe what it is and the significance?
Sure. Göbekli Tepe is um, a unbelievable archaeological dig site that's located in Turkey. Uh, and it's an amazing place. And I was supposed to be there this last summer, but unfortunately, what happened, so we couldn't go. But
Mm.
I'm going to try to get there this summer for sure. Um, but it's an amazing place in Sanliurfa. You go into Sanliurfa, Turkey, and you go to this archaeological dig site that spans for quite some ways. It's probably over a mile, to be honest with you. Only one small portion has actually been dug up, and that took about 10 years to do. This is now, in terms of historical evidence, I think there's a lot more older sites, but at least they're saying that this site is at least, 13 to 14,000 years old, which really has pushed mainstream archaeology to the absolute limit because they don't want to really go past 6,000 years for some reason. So
Yeah,
the
I
fact
know.
that they gave this thing that dating was like, whew, finally somebody's, waking up a little bit here.
Uh, do you know offhand of anything else that predates that? Because, I mean, that was a game changer. Or
Mhm.
archaeologists, like you said, I think the 6,000 years comes from the Bible, or maybe they just couldn't find anything beyond the
It's
Sumerians.
like an arbitrary number they just threw out there.
Yeah,
We don't,
yeah, exactly. It's sad, but it's
crazy.
true. Do you know of any other? I mean, for instance,
Yeah.
I've heard of the Sphinx, Sphinx being far, far
Oh, the Great
older.
Sphinx. My estimate of the Great Sphinx is 36,000 years old. That's my estimate of the Great Sphinx.
Wow.
Thoth talks about building the Great Pyramid about 36 plus thousand years ago, and which means he would have built the Sphinx around that same time period. Now, when you look at what they're saying about the Sphinx, they're trying to say, 4,000 years ago. That's a joke. When you look at the weathering of the Sphinx, the actual weathering. Now, now we know from now our great science how weathering works and what it does to different types of sandstone and rock. So we can actually judge the time period of the weathering, and we can say, okay, this level of weathering would take this many quote unquote thousands of years based off of how many inches of rainfall per year. So it's not even rocket science anymore. This is like basic science. So the fact that they keep throwing out these fake numbers just makes me laugh, and people don't know, so they take it. But when you look at the weathering, some other alternative archaeologists are trying to say, right around the time of the last ice age, 13,000 years, or the time of Göbekli Tepe. But I tend to think that wasn't even a good era for building of the Sphinx. And when you look at the weathering, it seems to be much older. Now, what's interesting is if you go back two precessional periods, you end up around 36,000 years, around the same time that Thoth claims to have built the Great Pyramid, and it matches perfectly with the construction of the Great Pyramid if those tablets are accurate. So I tend to think that the Great Sphinx is probably more likely around 36,000 years old, maybe even a little bit older than that. But that's the time frame that I think would have been the perfect time for that structure to be constructed. And there was a second Sphinx out there on Giza as well. That second Sphinx was actually destroyed, but the base of it was discovered. The trimming and the base of where it was located right across from the other Sphinx was found. Sphinxes very rarely are built in single, usually in pairs.
Now, yeah, the actual Sphinx, I believe it is a lion with a lion head with a dog body. Is that what's accepted these days,
No.
or?
Yeah, no, the Great Sphinx, that's what they're trying to say. Yes, it was a lion, and that's why the head that's on there now is not the right size, but that's actually inaccurate. If you go into the Sumerian tablets, you discover that Enki ordered his son Thoth in the tablets, he's called Ningzida. So he tells Ningzida to put his face, to build a lion facing the constellation of Leo and to put his face on it. And so originally it was Thoth's face, Thoth, also known as Ningzida. He's also known as Tahuti. He has many names. But him and his brother, Thoth and his brother, were at odds a lot, and even had a couple of battles. And so Enki tells Thoth, go over to the other side, go to Mesoamerica, kickstart a civilization over there. And and so when his brother was given the kingship over that area, his brother recarved Thoth's face from the Sphinx and put his son's face. So it's actually Thoth's nephew who's the face of the Sphinx, and that's why it's a much smaller head for the body. It was recarved from another humanoid type face to that humanoid face. It was never a lion according to the ancient Sumerian tablets.
Speaking of the Egypt and the Egyptian area, let me ask you this. Why pyramids? Because they're not just there. I mean, obviously, the Valley of the Kings and the Great Pyramid of Giza is the most famous, but we see them everywhere, whether they be step pyramids, like for instance in South America. And I'm going to blow a bombshell here that no one knows outside of two friends of mine, that they just discovered a pyramid in Hawaii on the Big Island, and hopefully that'll be archaeologists will converge there at some point. But this shows that people who supposedly had no contact with each other all were building these pyramids.
Yeah.
In your opinion, why that shape?
Okay, well, a couple reasons. Let me first tell you why they all have pyramids. They all have pyramids because they were given the architectural plans from Thoth, the Atlantean. He's the one who gave the order to build the pyramids, and he sent his crew and team around the planet to do so. You can read that in the Emerald Tablets, as you know, you can even find that online. So the Emerald Tablets, once he kickstarted civilization after the Great Flood in the land of Kem, he tells his crew, he says, spread out around the planet and duplicate what we've done here. This is why you find pyramids all over the planet. Now, the pyramid structure itself, it harnesses energy. So the pyramids are multifunctional stone computers and communications devices, and also even energy and power generators. The Great Pyramid, for example, at Giza, it's a multifunctional stone computer and communications device. It was built on top of an aquifer. At the time that it was built, the Nile ran right up alongside of Giza, right up alongside the plateau where the pyramids are located. Now it has meandered a lot more way off due to damming and everything else that was done. And so those aquifer and areas underneath the Great Pyramid are dried up tubes now. You can actually walk down there where the water used to flow. But when the water used to flow underneath that crystal granite, it would create physiostatic electricity. And that physiostatic electricity would create ions that would then flood up into the Queen's Chamber. The Queen's Chamber was a hydrogen filter. It would literally extract the hydrogen atoms and then shoot those up through those shafts that were openings on the side of the pyramid that are still there. Those are pointed at star systems, Orion, Aldebaran, and so forth, Sirius, because they would send communications on the hydrogen frequency, the same way we do now in our science laboratories, NASA and the European Space Agency. We send out communications on the hydrogen frequency into deep space, trying to see if there's anybody home out there. Somebody's going to answer us back, because hydrogen is the most widely used frequency. Scientists estimate, astrophysicists estimate, in the universe. And so they use that in the ancient past. The rest of those ions would flood up the Grand Gallery, which used to have resonating bars in there. Those slots for those resonating bars the bars have been removed, but the slots are still there, where they used to reside. Up the Grand Gallery into the King's Chamber, where it would be magnified by all the crystal granite in there, and then it would shoot up through the apex, and it would then send out this wireless electricity, which would be picked up by the obelisk. The obelisks are all crystal granite. They receive that wireless electricity, harness it, and then the Egyptians would have something called a jed pillar in their hands. It's very reminiscent of a Tesla coil inside of a object that looks kind of like an ankh, with a tube coming out of it. That tube was actually a wire that would connect to light bulbs and such. And that's how come you won't find any soot inside of any of the tombs, any of the crypts in Egypt. The reason why there's no soot in the ceilings or the roofs, when all that elaborate painting and glyphing that they did, was because they had powered light. They didn't have to use torches.
What comes to mind is Baghdad batteries,
Yes.
and for people to say, oh, these are just pottery. Well, why the copper wire and the citrus fluid, whether it be, I believe it's lemon. Somebody had to know something.
Oh yeah, they knew.
Yeah.
The Baghdad batteries were used for gold plating, so that, it didn't have enough power to do too much more. But you can gold plate, and gold plating was huge in ancient Egypt. So that's what the Baghdad batteries were used for, gold plating.
I got a couple other topics because I know we're on a time crunch, and then I have some questions from the chat. So anybody in the chat, if I missed your question because it's too far past, please copy and paste it and rewrite it when I say we're going to take questions. I see Pyramid 7 has one, and by the way, thank you, Pyramid, for your super chat. I will say that again. So start piling them up. In your opinion, Mr. Carson, do you think that we have the ability to travel through time or dimensions?
Yes, absolutely. One of I own a tech company called First Class Space, and with First Class Space, I get to go to the Space Symposium, which gives me approved top secret access the last couple of years into the private space room at the symposium. And so with TS clearance in private space, you get to learn a lot of things. I'm in the room with, the bigwigs. And what's interesting is, what I can tell you is that whatever you could think of definitely has already been done. And we used to say that the government and other black budget agencies were about 50 to 80 years ahead of the general population. That is no longer true. It's more like 300 years ahead now.
Wow.
And so time travel can be done simply by even using lasers. And so you can use lasers, and you can create with enough vortex. You create a laser vortex, first of all. So it's not lasers in a straight beam. They're actually angled in a vortex from the top of a device going down towards the bottom, which creates a loop in space-time. It's a special type of a laser. And then what you do is you piggyback bits of data, zeros and ones, on that vortex, and you can actually send data back in time. And we know this for a fact now. So going back in time is not that difficult. Going forward in time requires you obtaining a percentage of the speed of light in some way, shape, or form. So you would need to be on a ship that's moving, that's obtaining a percentage of the speed of light or better, in order to be able to travel forward in time. Now, when you get on a rocket ship and travel to the moon, or you get on an airplane, you're traveling somewhere, you actually are traveling in time by very, very minute amounts. I mean, extremely, extremely small amounts, but you are moving ahead in time based on, the perception of somebody that's actually standing on the ground. So we know time travel into the future based off of acceleration is a fact as well. So time travel is real. It's just a matter of developing the technology to make it a possibility. And there has to be some kind of rules and laws against this, because time travel can also be extremely detrimental and cause a lot of problems, obviously, for somebody who was able to do it. Now, one thing, though, is I think when you travel back in time, you have the grandfather paradox.
Yes,
where
thank
you. Can
you.
actually kill
I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah. Now, here's what I think actually happens is when you travel back in time, because we live in a multiverse, there's a frequency shift of going back in time. And that frequency shift puts you in a different universe. So you can go back in time and you can kill your grandfather because you're going back in time on a different timeline. I think once you shift back in time, going backwards, you shift timelines, and that's why you can kill your grandfather.
Essentially, because we're going through different timelines. And have you ever heard of Dan Burrish?
No, I haven't heard that name.
He supposedly worked at S4, I think, a decade and a half after Bob Lazar. The point being he was a biologist, and he was working with what was called J-Rod. That was the nickname for an ET. And
J-Rod.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that, sure, that J-Rod, his home planet, is Zeta Reticula, but he is human. It's just, there are multiple timelines. So, for instance, when they had group meetings, it could be the same species, Homo sapien, and of course evolving, and even the Nordic type beings, but because they're in different timelines, they could all be in the same area for a so-called summit, and nothing like the grandfather paradox would come into play, which actually is something that really boggles anyone's mind. It's like, wait a minute, I can take a time machine, go back, kill my grandfather, and I'm still alive? How would that work? But clearly, obviously, it doesn't work. It sounds to me like a 1930s or 40s comic is what the grandfather paradox is. Anyhow, now, another important thing I wanted to ask you about is consciousness. I've noticed that a lot of people who were nuts and bolts of UFOs or cryptozoology, Bigfoot even, or anything, essentially has now realized that consciousness is one of the most, if not the most important thing that we have to be looking at. What's your take on consciousness?
Well, the main reason why I do what I do in terms of working in this conscious community and doing all these interviews and shows and networks and everything else is because I believe that consciousness is the utmost important thing, because there is only consciousness that exists. There's nothing else that actually exists here. I think that we all are coming from the one same consciousness, and that we are just all slightly tuned frequencies of that one. Just like there's a radio station in your city that broadcasts out 99.1, 99.2, 99.3, but all those frequencies are coming from the same source. And so that's the way that, in my opinion, that it works. And I really believe that it's our duty for people that have kind of woken up or become awakened to a certain level. We haven't all, come to the top yet, but including myself. But if we can begin to help wake up other peoples and help them realize that we are all one, that there is only one consciousness, that separation is an illusion, then we can start to drop some of these programmed facades like race and religion and politics and things like that. We can just begin to just love one another, have unconditional love for one another, really embrace one another, and push together, strive forward as a unified, human race. Because if you travel from Earth to another planet that's inhabited, and you pop off your helmet and you start talking to the people there, and they say, well, where are you from? You're not going to say, I'm from America, I'm from Mexico, I'm from, Spain. You're going to say, I'm from Earth. And, I'm part of the human race. That's how it most likely logically would be stated. And so we just have to come to that point where we realize, man, that we are really all one. And that when I'm talking to you, I'm actually talking to myself. And when you're talking to me, you're talking to yourself, because there is only one consciousness. It's just like a scientist body. The avatar body of a scientist is made up of billions of atoms. But a scientist will look through an electron microscope to look at an atom. So a scientist is nothing but billions of atoms analyzing itself.
Great answer. I honestly, one of the best, actually, not one of, but the best answer I've heard, because we are all one. The differences between us are so minute. I mean, chimps look so differently. I mean, yes, they're bipedal. They have two eyes, a mouth, and nose. But even they, I believe it's like almost 99% is identical to the DNA of ours. So humans to humans, I don't think there is much difference at all, if anything. Okay, let me give, since I know we started a little bit late, and I know you have other commitments. First, let me give a shout out to my super chatters today. I want to thank, in order that they came in, Alex Oyen and Rockstar and Pyramid 7. I want to thank you all because you are giving the support and keeping me from practicing law in courtrooms, which I hate. So I appreciate that. Now, let's get to some of these questions. And I'm going to start with the first question that I'm able to see. It's one of three. I believe this is from Pyramid 7. And if anyone has a question written before that, please copy and paste it in caps or rewrite it in caps, because we don't have much time. So I'm going to read it word for word. Here it goes. Does he believe that Epstein and Ghislaine were helping discover hidden civilizations, specifically near Cuba, helping Castro, or Castro requested their help? What's your take on that?
No, I don't believe in that at all. There is, however, a pyramid complex right off the coast of Cuba. There's also another one in the center of the Bermuda Triangle, right off the coast of Florida. And those pyramid complexes are actually well documented and have been taken photos of via side scan radar and radar from boats. And there were divers that even went down. There's actually even a documentary that came out in the late 1980s about this on mainstream TV. I have a copy of that documentary on Forbidden Knowledge TV. And History Channel actually did a special on one of those pyramid complexes down there. I don't think that Ghislaine Maxwell and the other guy, Epstein, had anything to do or has anything. I think they were totally focused on something totally different.
Blackmail. That's what I think.
That's all they did was record conversations and videotape people and use it as blackmail to stay rich. But the fact that those things are down there. Now, what's very interesting, real quickly, is if you take a line, if you go to the center of the Bermuda Triangle and you go down there, you'll find a pyramid down there. And if you go a straight line from the Bermuda Triangle straight through the earth to the other side, you come out at the Dragon's Triangle with the Yonaguni Pyramid underwater there in Japan, which can be dove to right now. And also the same mysterious disappearances and everything else at the Yonaguni Pyramid site at the Dragon's Triangle on the other side of the planet. Straight line through the earth, you end up there. No coincidence.
I also heard on top of the triangle, the two triangles, is underwater pyramid near Alaska, and also on the east or northeast coast, I guess you could say, of Canada. Have you heard of those two?
Yeah, I've heard of those two as well. There's actually a lot more being discovered, more and more. So, even under the sands of Giza, they found, 200 pyramids buried underneath the sand right now over there. But there's pyramids literally everywhere. Off a lot of the coastlines, you'll find pyramid structures, and they're literally everywhere. This planet was riddled with pyramids. It's just really incredible.
Now, I'm going to ask my question before I jump to the next one. Is it your opinion that the pyramids were made by non-terrestrial beings, or were they made by Homo sapiens, but by being taught how to make them by ETs?
Yeah. Initially, they were made by these Atlantean Anunnaki people. And so, but after the Great Flood, an order was made, and this is, you can read the Sumerian Kings list, which is in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford, England. After the Great Flood, kingship was handed down to man, and so what they would do is they would create a pharaoh or a king that would be the liaison between these Anunnaki Atlanteans and the people. And so at that point, which they were taught in the techniques of pyramid building and megalithic structure building under the guidance of some of these Anunnaki Atlantean people. So initially it was done strictly by the extraterrestrials, and then much later, after at least one of the great floods that destroyed that region of the planet, it was handed down to man to do that work under the guidance and instruction of these beings.
A great answer, and honestly, I think that's the best one and most logical that I've ever heard, because usually people tend to side one or the other, not the both. Okay, yeah. This next one, Lasha Senyak. Have the ancient civilizations left us other records than pyramids, stone tablets, or drawings, or anything? If not, why not? They took the trouble to leave pyramids?
Yeah, we have a lot of evidence of these ancient cultures. We have cylinder scrolls. These are in the British Museum and the Ashmolean Museum. We had a lot of great stuff in the Iraq Museum until the U.S. government went there.
Yeah. Both times. Or actually, we drove.
To steal them.
Yeah. I actually heard possible Stargate was taken.
When they got there, now my friend was at the site of the Ziggurat of Ur, and I have pictures of that, him and the military soldiers there on my Anunnaki History Facebook group online. So he was there, and at the Ziggurat of Ur, after they got done wrecking the museum, Saddam's museum, and stealing all the evidence of ancient technology and stealing those scrolls and tablets, they then went to the Ziggurat of Ur, and they went inside, and they took out this object which looked like something very reminiscent of the Stargate from the movie Stargate, a giant stone-looking disc with all these crazy inscriptions on it. He said they carried it out, they put it on the back of a double-wide Humvee, military Humvee, put a tarp over it, and he said they drove off and he never saw it again.
Wow.
And so, but it's really amazing. So the WMD, or the weapon of mass destruction, may have been this, that they were after, may have been this Stargate. And because obviously you wouldn't want your opponents or your, people to activate this thing or figure out how to activate it, and who knows what can come through. So they got their hands on it, and wherever it's located now, I'm pretty sure they're probably experimenting with this thing. But I would say that would be a global mission to take down a Stargate that we don't know what's on the other side. I sure would want somebody to activate that thing because we don't know what would happen. So I think that's what they went over there and got. They got that Stargate, and they stole all the evidence of technology at that museum. And what happened was the Minister of Transportation of Iraq in 2015, I believe it was, or 2015 or 2016, he went on national TV and said that this is the cradle of civilization, and Iraq was the first place in ancient times, of advanced airports and rocket ships. And everybody thought he was crazy, but he came out and made that official statement and said that this is where they were. The Anunnaki, basically, this is where we did it. They had all the spaceships, they had all the airplanes right here. Their first airports were right here in Iraq.
Again, I'm going to break from one of their questions to ask one of my questions. Do you think now, today, 2021, this year, that we have human-looking ETs walking amongst us?
Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. Matter of fact, several former NATO officers have come forward and spoken on this. One of them more recently, he died, but he had NATO cosmic top clearance. Cosmic is higher than above top secret, and he says that you can be
Robert Dean.
Robert Dean.
Yeah,
right, Robert Dean.
One of my first interviews. Great.
Rest in peace, Robert Dean.
Amen.
His son still works at the Pentagon now. Okay, but obviously he's gone, unfortunately. But he came out before he died, and he said that they could be sitting next to you in a movie theater, on an airplane. You wouldn't even know that they were not Homo sapiens sapien.
You know what? I'm not surprised. Timothy Good actually wrote in his most recent book and described in detail when I had him on last, literally having two ETs in different times that looked human, and he thought something was off, and he essentially said in his mind, if you are who I think you are, take your left hand and touch your right side of the nostril, opposite, something like that. Sure enough, that being did so while on stage and then looked directly at him. So I tend to agree. And then, of course, David Jacobs, knock on wood, poor guy cannot do interviews anymore for some health issues, but his most recent book was Walking Amongst Us. Okay, let me get to the last ones because I know we're on a time crunch here. Okay, this one is, it's more of a generalized question because it was written about 15 minutes ago. This is from Rockstar. Who is educated with this knowledge, and how do they keep it hidden? Great
question. The elites are educated, first of all. We're talking about Rockefeller, Rothschild, their entire bloodlines. The bloodline that owns all the central banking systems around the entire planet. They're well educated on this information. Matter of fact, there have been statements from the Rothschilds saying that they are born to rule over us. They actually really truly believe that because their bloodline can be traced back to some of the Sumerian kings. And then, of course, you have the major governments of the world, of course, the military-industrial complex run out of America, and then the European military They're well in Russia. They're well versed on this information. They're well researched. The scientists that are behind the scenes in some of these tucked away, laboratories, like well, you used to have Area 51. Now it's moved to Area 52. Area 52 is nearby. You can get through it through an underground tunnel. There's nothing really too much more left at Area 51 anymore. But you have these scientists down there that are working on these projects, researching these tablets, going over these ancient texts and trying to duplicate these experiments and different scientific achievements from the ancient past. So they're well aware of it. And the reason why they don't want every single person knowing about this and getting this information and learning about all this ancient technology, there's several reasons. The first reason is the religious system will collapse in minutes. The religious system just in only America is worth over more money than all the tech companies in Silicon Valley combined. We're talking about over $1 trillion a year. And so we have that will collapse. That's a huge money machine. Then the second reason is all of a sudden you're going to have people demanding access to this technology. We're going to want free energy. We're going to want anti-gravity. We're going to want all these things to make our lives better, which is going to disrupt current economic systems and take the money out of their pocket because they haven't figured out that you can still have the other way and still be wealthy. They haven't figured that part out yet because they're not that, and they're smart in some ways, but in some other ways they're dumb. And then the other reason is because security, global security. If I know how all of a sudden I know how to make an anti-gravity ferrofluid vortex engine and put it inside of a ship and take off, and I can leave this planet. I can fly into a secure area undetected now, and I can steal things. I may even try to steal a nuke. I mean, who knows? So there's a global security issue with freely having access to advanced technology. And no matter how far back you go in time and any text you read, when civilization had advanced tech, they would always keep it top secret. This is nothing new, and that's because people will take advantage of it. So those are the three top reasons.
This question that I'm about to ask, we essentially covered. I'm going to ask it anyway, but it could just be a yes or no from you since we did mention. Okay. Don Harrison says, does Billy believe that the Desert Storm War was about retrieval of ancient relics and possible stargates from an alien civilization?
That's what we talked about, yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it was about. That was a WMD. Was the weapon of mass destruction was potentially a Stargate. Fortunately, I had a friend of mine, that was there, which is great because that gave me more verification and validation of my theory. And I posted those pictures up on my group. But and then of course the fact that was well documented that we went and stormed into the museum and blew open the doors to the basement where there were the majority of the most incredible relics were located and literally stole them. So that's what it was about.
Okay, another one from Lasha Senyak. Does he think that the government is looking for the DNA of people from before the flood, i.e. giants' DNA, so they can clone super soldiers?
That's a great question. Actually, I don't think they want to clone the super soldiers. I think what you want to do is you take the you need to make one clone, but what you do is you try to find out different aspects of their super strength, their bone density. You try to find out what types of resiliency they had to different types of viruses or illnesses or diseases or injuries, and then you just do gene editing into existing people and breed that same exact those abilities into existing soldiers. So that's kind of what they're into.
Last question from the chat, and we'll get to wrap up. Again from Lasha. Is Göbekli Tepe a Stargate?
Another great question. Göbekli Tepe is possibly a Stargate and a time portal. If you look at the stone pillars, you see dinosaurs on the stone pillars with meat on their bones. You see some animals that we don't even recognize where they're from on this planet. And then you see some animals that are from different regions of the planet altogether. And so I think that it's possible that it's a a portal to transfer from place to place at a rapid speed, and also possibly it could have been a location of some type of a time machine.
Unfortunately, because of the time, I know me and you can go on for hours. So next time we'll shoot again, and hopefully it'll be on video, which was planned. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Now, where can people find you?
Please
Gaia,
look me up.
Ancient
Yes,
Aliens.
please look me up on forbiddenknowledge.com with the number 4, knowledge, forbiddenknowledge.com. You can also find me on Forbidden Knowledge TV. So if you have Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, or your iOS or App Store, just type in Forbidden Knowledge TV, and my TV app will pop up. I have over 3,000 shows, documentaries, and movies up there that are all based on conscious content, what we're talking about today. Of course, you can find me on Gaia. I'm also on the Travel Channel right now on 3 shows. I'm on the History Channel, the Discovery Channel on 2 shows, and the Science Channel on 1 show as well.
Wow. You're definitely getting the word out there, and it's needed because people need to be informed. And I'm so happy that the last Gallup poll, I think it was 68% or something like that, that people around the globe now believe that we are not alone, and not to mention all the other topics. Let me say a few things for everybody out there. If this is your first time, please make sure you subscribe and share. Also, write a comment if you have one. I read them all, and I do my best to reply to every single one. Although there are a ton, I do my best to respond to all of them, and that is me, not my team that's doing so. And also, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up. All those things help. And one more time, I want to thank my super chatters. I've decided to start waiting for the questions and super chats to the end. That way I can get the unedited interview of me and the guest, for the most part, and then I'll leave the last 25% or so for the people out there watching and listening. So, Alex Owen, thank you. Rockstar, super thank you. And